Welcome to the Amazing Authorities Podcast, where game changers, visionaries, and category leaders share how they built their brands, platforms, and global influence. Your host is Mitch Carson, international speaker, media strategist, and creator of the Instant Authority System. If you're ready to learn from those who've done it and want to become the go-to expert in your space, you're in the right place.
Ben Cena is in the house. Now, I don't know if you get asked this very often, Ben. Are you related to John Cena, the famous wrestler and actor?
Mitch, not at all. I was maybe asked that a couple of times, but that's not. This is my American shortened last name, so it's not a real last name.
Well, I know you hail from Lithuania originally, and I've met some of the nicest people from Lithuania, and I played volleyball with a group of them from the Baltic Sea years ago, the Estonians, Lithuanians, and a Finnish group of people. And they all seemed to get along, and I don't know what language they were speaking, but they all had a mutual language. I know each has its own, but you're here, and you've gotten into, and you provide services for wannabe authors and people that are considering about getting a book. Tell us what you do for people that are in that category or in that spot in their life, Ben. Sorry, I called you John Cena. Oh my gosh.
No, that's good. That's good. That's gonna catch some eyeballs. So I think, there are different things that we do, but at the core, what we are really doing is, because we are working with leaders and business owners for the most part, almost more than 90% of our business is there. And what we are really doing is, number one, we're turning those ideas into best-selling books. That's number one. And number two, we are saving them time in terms of everything, what it takes from the idea stage until that book becomes a bestseller, in terms of writing the book itself, the distribution, and the marketing, right? So these are kind of three core phases that we move them through without them really knowing about that, right? So because they don't have to, because we have to focus on their business, and they have to focus on being themselves rather than trying to put some words on a piece of paper or a notebook.
Okay, so if you get a CEO who's just bought, he's just rolling out of his IRA or his 401k, he got bought out of his position, he cashed in his stock, and then the next step is, okay, how am I going to leave a legacy for my grandkids? How do I memorialize my life? Is this the type of person you help, Ben?
Maybe 20 to 30% of the time, most people that really take action on such a thing, which is not an autobiography kind of book, which is more leadership, business driven type of book, is more about those people who have achieved something, but they're not going into retirement yet. They're going to the next stage of their life. So they are out of the operations. This is what I learned there, where most of our clients are. They're out of the operations, or they're changing something, right? They switch from one place to the other, and they understand the value of a targeted, expertise-driven book, and how that book is going to drive either their thing forward, right? And they have more time to leverage it, or we understand that in terms of where we are going, this book is also going to help them very much, and help them establish credibility within that new or already existing field.
Well, that's great. And so that it isn't necessarily the person that's retiring, they're transitioning. Maybe they want to get on board seats, or maybe they want to launch a speaking career. Is that who you?
Yes, you're 100% correct, Mitch. And we had several clients where they either want to raise their speaking gigs, for example, to go from 10K to 25K. And in order to do that, they have to understand they have to make some changes. Sometimes the changes are structural. Sometimes changes are in terms of a category. They're switching from one category to another because it's very difficult to get that high of a speaking gig within one category of business, and they have to move on to higher level corporate help, right? For example, and we have one client like that we are working with now. So you're 100% correct, Mitch, and people are looking more to use that book, which I'm happy that they start to understand that. Some people still need explanation rather than saying, okay, I have done everything in my life. Now is now the time is for a book, right? And now already 75 years old or whatever.
Yeah. So what is the difference between a best-selling author and someone who has just written a book and doesn't have that badge? Have you noticed a difference?
Yes, one major difference, and that difference is very simple. People who are thinking about it being a bestseller, we have to think about that in the very beginning before we do anything else, meaning the market appeal, the market opportunity. Those who just write the book and they jump into doing the writing stuff, whether they do it themselves or not, doesn't matter. And then they think, okay, I'm going to think about it later. It's not how it works, right? You have to have that. I like to give an equivalent, kind of a metaphor about a rock, right? If it's a nice rock with, very round rock, it goes very easily. You can push it a little bit, and even if it's down the hill, it rolls, right? This is what's marketing, right? You give it some force, which is marketing, and just rolls very nicely, and it becomes a bestseller, and people take it, and it can survive for many months and years, and hopefully even decades, right? Now, on the other side, you have a rock with very sharp edges, pits, and it goes up the hill, right? So no matter how much you're gonna push it, it's not gonna roll,
All
right?
right.
And if it doesn't roll, this is where people think about it last, right? No, I have this, whatever rock. What do I do with that? Can I market it? Will people understand it? How will the market will take it, right? So this is the major kind of thing in terms of a mindset and understanding. And this is why people usually come to us to say, okay, I need to work with somebody from the very beginning in order to make it successful.
That's great. Now, when you say bestseller, is this an Amazon bestseller? Is it a Wall Street Journal bestseller, New York Times bestseller? Maybe you could share that with the audience, what the differences are.
The difference is in the numbers, right? Now, the Wall Street bestseller doesn't exist anymore, right? It ended in 2023. Now, Amazon bestseller and New York Times bestseller, there are two major differences. So when it comes to the kind of the smaller scale, leverage is, of course, Amazon, right? Usually that works within 300 and 800 sale kind of range that has to happen within one particular week. And similar to that is the New York Times, which has just a higher kind of tier, which is around 10,000. So the difference is usually quite big, right? So most people opt in for the smaller opportunity, which is still quite big when it comes to most categories, rather than really focusing on that focus of New York Times. And there's a lot of bureaucracy there too. So
Yeah.
you will never know if you're actually gonna land there unless you get an insider confirmation beforehand.
Insider confirmation. Now, the numbers that I have heard vary because nobody supposedly knows the algorithm for the New York Times. I've heard as little as 8,000. You mentioned 10,000. I've heard those numbers range, and the algorithm can change. And I know the Wall Street Journal people have talked about that, and they sunsetted that. There's the USA Today bestseller. There are a few other categories, but I think New York Times is the pinnacle. Isn't that the ultimate?
Let's proceed as the ultimate one. there are some criteria, there are some specific criteria, but there are no guarantees. Right now, with Amazon, if you are at number one, you see it being number one. It is number one. You capture it number one, right? If you know, and with New York Times, with USA Today is more simple to understand. You know, there is an algorithm behind it in terms of a calculation. The New York Times is much more sophisticated, and you know, the human element of approving it being on the list is, I think, is the most tricky part, you know, because you can match all the criteria in terms of, okay, we sold 12,000 books, which is more than needed in most categories. It's diverse enough, so it is on Amazon, and there is no more than 80% on Amazon sales, right? There's another criteria, and you're still not gonna land there, right? So that's kind of the thing where sometimes people bet on that, and it doesn't happen, and you spend $200,000. So you make your choice. So I think, you know, it is kind of the pinnacle of what you want to achieve. But I think at the end of the day, what is important is the specificity of a book and the leverage in terms of how you use it. Right? So I think at the end of the day, that's what's most important for the author himself or herself.
And do you think audiobooks are important now? Should an author have an audiobook to as a companion, hardback, or just a Kindle? What is your opinion?
I think authors have to have all versions of a book, and we learned that by tracking all the sales, different components of sales. Audiobooks are capturing more and more of the market share in terms of Audible and Spotify now. So there are two growing categories, and even Spotify even more now. But people like to consume content different ways, and what we learned is one very simple kind of rule. People want to have the knowledge as if they read the book, not as if they listened to the book, right? So they buy the book, but they don't read it. They listen to it, and they would talk to other people as if they read that, even though they listened to it, right? So people are more prone to listening to the audiobooks rather than reading and sitting down with a book or the Kindle, whatever it is. But they listen and say, well, did you read the book? Yes. So people want to get those accolades of, you know, all the credentials of, okay, I have the books, you know, for show,
Sure.
right, in
Yeah.
my background, and I have the knowledge of listening to it, so I have all the actual information in my head, which is more convenient, right? You can wash the dishes and uh, read the book at the same time, which is listening, not reading.
Sure. Sure. But there's greater retention listening than reading. It's been proven. And I think audiobooks are on the rise, and I've read that and I know, but we're on a podcast. Podcasts are on the rise. More and more people are podcasting these days and consuming the information auditorily. I mean, you've gone to the next level. You're using a headset. You're more professional than me. I just have a high quality mic. I don't like my ears start to itch with the headset. So I did
You
that
know,
for
I
years.
think I think I use that because I kind of like to detach myself from the surroundings, because
Yeah.
I only use voice canceling stuff. So I
Yeah.
can just focus being here. So that's the only reason. Otherwise, I would look just like as nice as you. I look like a Tinky Winky from a TV series.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, I don't use the headset because I did that. I was a radio show host in LA in my past and had to wear a headset for being inside for recording purposes. I mean, we were live, so it was a little bit different, but the feedback I had to listen to the engineer in the booth if anything was
Oh
going
yes.
wrong or a guest wasn't doing so well. Have you found what are the key takeaways of being an author with your company versus trying to go to the traditional route of getting a publisher like a Time Warner or Penguin Books or one of the other big branded book? I mean, I'm sure there's some big ones in the UK that I'm just not aware of. What do you offer that they don't?
Well, the question is, what do they offer, right?
Okay.
People
And I'll have a comment for that also, because I was published by John Wiley in 2008. So I know that I would never go back.
you have to know the nitty-gritty details in terms of what you want, the chances of you getting there, and what do they offer, right? So these are kind of different brackets of questions, right? Now, first of all, what do you want, right? How much of the ownership do you want to have within your own book? This is kind of the main question. The second question is, what would you get, right? Are you getting the distribution? Are you getting the writing part? Are you getting the editing part? Getting just the proofreading? Are we working on the cover? Are we working on the design elements of the Amazon and Barnes and Nobles? And then are we producing the audiobook? Do you have to figure that out yourself? You know, there are a lot of ins and outs and details of the contract that you really have to figure out, so you're not in a place where, okay, so where do we go from here? You know, and this is what happens so many times with authors, and they are not very much clear. Most of them are working on a manuscript, and then they figure out that, okay, these are so many pieces that are still missing. Right now, if you are thinking about the top publishers, two things. If you know, and I'm all for that, if you want to go that route, and most people go that route for what I learned, maybe two reasons. One is they don't want to go through the hassle of figuring everything out themselves, and the second one is, of course, distribution, right? Now, the type of distribution is you're only gonna get 1/3 of what they are gonna get, right? So we're gonna usually keep 2/3 of the royalties, whatever it is, and you're gonna get 1/3. No matter if you're Jordan Peterson or just a regular Joe Schmo. But if you're a regular Joe Schmo, usually you're not gonna get a good deal anyway. You're not gonna even get an answer from them, right? I'm talking about the big guys, right? The
Sure, sure.
Penguins and all of them, right? So you really have to kind of sit down, and we have, you know, these graphs and everything for you to make the best decision, right? Because most people think that, okay, I'm going that route, but success is guaranteed. Success is not guaranteed. You know, they just advertise 10 books that are doing the best, right? And the rest of them are doing absolutely nothing, right? Now, and you're not in control of that. You cannot change anything. You cannot change the cover. You cannot change description. You cannot add any promotional, you know, stuff. And the contracts are very sticky. You have to kind of ask, hey, hello, can I change this? Can I do more advertising here? You know, are you doing something, right? So we really have to go to the nitty-gritty detail in order to understand that. So this is kind of a two-side kind of thing, I would
So you're
say.
talking control. You have very little control.
Control.
When you go with the big publisher. You have much more freedom going the route with you. So you take people on a guide, you suggest what they can do, but you don't control them.
We don't we let them control as much as they want to control, right? We love control. Don't get me wrong. We love to control all the pieces because we know what works, what doesn't work,
Sure.
and we try to figure out what the customer wants and give them what they need, right? And not what they want at the same time. But we want to give them all the control, right? You want to change this, great. You want to add this, great. Did your customer changed, right? Let's add something else within the book that makes sense for your new customer. You will never be able to do that with a traditional publisher. And 97% of the time, nobody's going to accept you anyway. So don't bother too much.
Well, there is a good point. So, Ben, you for people who travel, pandemic changed a lot of that, but travel is resumed around the world. It's back to where it was, and in many countries, it's even greater today. Although we consume content virtually a lot more than before. Airport bookstores. What is your opinion on getting your book inside that, and is it easily achieved?
I think you have to understand, first of all, how you're getting there, right? And there's some specific nature of the books that get into those places. They have to be widely applicable, right? We cannot be very much niche down, right? Do you want those books to be there? Probably. There are different ways how you get there, even if they want it. I'll give you an example. The other week we got an order of 3,000 books, right? Several airports for one of our clients. And what they want is we wanted to finance half, we want to finance us to finance the other half, right? And they are usually over ordering by 2-3 times, and there are no guarantees of selling through, right?
Correct.
And we have to eat up everything else. We have to cover the shipping back costs, right? If they don't sell through enough, right? And they are over ordering for a reason, because if it does sell very well, which they think is gonna sell, right? But we don't know, because a book is niche down, right? It's not necessarily that the book is something wrong with the book, but the book is more niche down. And now we have to eat everything else up. So you really have to kind of sit down and do the calculations. The way I see it being a benefit is you go to the airport once you get that book in and use it for marketing reasons. Take some pictures, you arrange some signing possibly, or whatever it is, and you say, oh, this is my book here, that's great, etc., etc., etc. But in most cases, unless you have a very widely applicable book, but 50% of people would benefit from, right? People who pass the airport, it is not the best place. It's not better than online. It's not better than some more niche stores, for example. So, and it's not better than selling as much and as many as you can on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Audible, for example. Audible, of course,
Got it.
being an audiobook platform.
Yeah,
People fancy it. People fancy that those airport stores or whatever stores. There are different kinds of franchises across states, across Europe. I see it as a marketing opportunity. You come in once in Barnes and Noble, and you get your book inside. You do some promotion. You advertise it all over socials, but you want to make sure that it's done right. You do a little testing, you see it sells through. You're not kind of, okay, I'm going to order 3,000 copies. It's going to cost you $20,000, and then you're going to pay extra to get back, and you go to negative rather than even making money. And you're going to get that balance in 90 days later.
Well, it's interesting you bring this up about how they are working now. I had my book called The Silent Salesman, which I was published through John Wiley. I paid out of pocket, even though they were the publisher. Back then, independent publishers weren't allowed to get into you had to go through a name publisher. I had to pay, I forgot the amount of money, but it was close to $10,000 for buying the real estate of having my book in that bookstore around the country in the US. There was one company that had the license for all the airport bookstores. And I sold several thousand copies, but like you said, it was arranged with my publisher to get the books back. They might have had a separate arrangement for independent publishers. It's very deal. I was a pitchman on a channel called Home Shopping Network in the 90s. And how they worked is somebody wants to sell their products on television, which we would have about 5 million viewers at any one time watching what we were selling. But these poor people, they would overorder, as you said, Ben, to the letter, and they'd have to pay for the shipment back. Most of the time, I don't know the number, but let's say the majority of the time, people lost money because they would overorder, anticipating big sales, hoping for big sales, but you never know what the public will buy. And then they'd have to pay these huge fees or end up just leaving them there because they couldn't afford it. And they also paid their accounts about 90 to 180 days out anyway for what they did.
That's very much correct. And I understand the logic behind it. It's about the risk, right? The stores order many books. They shelf 10 copies, and they have 100 copies or 150 copies in a back
In the
to make sure
warehouse. Yeah.
that exactly, and to make sure that we can just stack them back when needed, and at the same time we have a very nice agreement, money up front from somebody to
Right.
make sure that if we have to ship them, it's going to be taken care of. We don't have to eat that margin. Of course, big names have better deals because the sell-through is we do it very much differently because we know the application is that wide. But even for more niche down books, this is kind of that thing where if it sells through, we're gonna keep that book for years in the store. And most of the time it's not worth it. And most people don't know how to use it in terms of leveraging it online, which is I think the most important piece.
No, I would tend to agree. That's where people consume, and oftentimes people will go into a bookstore in airports, and I've done this, gone in and looked and think, okay, I'll read this later, or I don't have room in my bag, and I may go and look and peruse books. I'm a reader. I like physical books, but I'll end up buying it from Amazon later to ship to my house because it was more convenient. And I didn't necessarily buy it. I already had a book with me that I was going to read, and I'm just looking, and these authors pay for big stands inside. There is the prestige, and you made a really good point. Do they do book signings inside there? Are they taking photos with their books? It's about elevating their brand. Very good point, Ben. And using
So
that as
many people
leverage.
mention. Sorry for interrupting, because I'm a kind of person who's gonna forget in 2 seconds what I want to say. So many times, and I'm doing it myself, and you just look at the numbers. Every year, the physical stores of the books are declining by
Yes.
1%, 1.5%. You do what you want, but it's just how it is. It's a declining market. It's gonna keep declining for the next 20, 30 years until it's on a point where it's not prestige anymore. It's just something that still goes around, like newspapers, right? There are still newspapers, physical ones. People read them. That's fine, but that market is not growing.
No.
People go into the stores. This is a nice book. Great. Pulling my phone out, right? I just ordered 2 copies to my home. I don't want to carry them around. I'm not gonna buy it at the store, right? I love the book. I'm very excited. I'm not gonna buy it. The book is not selling through, right? Just purely because of reason. And I do the same thing. I don't want to carry books around. There
Right.
is no, unless I have somebody who's gonna carry books for me, right? We can make it happen in Dubai. It's not very difficult. But for most people, no, people don't. Customer experience is not the same way because consumer behavior is different now.
Oh,
People
it's
just like,
changed.
oh, yep.
Yeah, and then maybe you'll get the Kindle version. I don't like Kindle books personally. I like physical books. Just a matter of what I'm comfortable with. But I have read them, and I've done that. I've taken a shot. Oh, I'll buy this later and have it shipped to my house. And same. I don't want to carry it around. I already have a book in my bag, and I can't read 2 books on a flight that's 2 hours. I didn't take a speed
Exactly.
reader. Yeah, so it's
Exactly. I hate Kindle books.
yeah, and
I
it's in
I
a declining
absolutely hate
market.
digital books.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and,
so
and
that's
maybe that's my personal take. Some people do love them, but for me, I like having the book. I think is very much part of that
yep.
kind of author's journey where you want to physically have it. You want to have conversations about them. You want to touch it. You want to feel it. You want to highlight it. Some people like Kindles. They highlight within Kindle, but you kind of don't own it. You don't own the copy when you have it in Kindle. When you have something in digital format, I think by the nature of the book, and this is why online paperback and hardcover sales are not declining, are much more stable and actually a bit growing
Mm.
compared to bookstore sales, or even the Kindle, which is growing almost at the same rate as the physical books that are sold online.
Yeah, and it's you're spot on with the retailers and that whole cultural experience of standing up, buying a Starbucks, sitting in Barnes and Noble, That's how it is in America. You buy, or maybe have a stack of books, and then you end up out of guilt buying them from Barnes and Noble, maybe. But then there are people that take photos and then buy it online and have it because it's cheaper. But Amazon
Exactly.
is less expensive than the high overhead of a physical store. But you've bought the coffee for $7 for having a frappe latte triple creamer, with a twist, and you spend $7 on this expensive coffee, and you're sitting there going through these books, and then you end up walking out of there. At least I'm guilty. I'll buy them because I know what retailers are going through, and it's a convenience of doing that. But not everybody operates the same, and they
Exactly. I buy them
will.
also. I buy them in the store as well, and I buy them for analytical reasons, not
Exactly.
because I'm a customer. I love the cover. I love this. I just kind of go through the whole experience. I buy 5 of them. But if I was a reader, it's not convenient. So I just like, okay, I'm gonna do it the new way. And the
Right.
Barnes and Noble physical sales are declining 2% every year.
Yeah.
So
And
that's what it is.
in Japan, for example, I have a friend who's a very well-known author named Ken Honda. He's sold about 9 million copies of his books in Japan. He's in all of the train stations. They have a big subway system in Tokyo, 38 million people. I mean, that in itself, he sells in Japanese his books, most of them through physical books, but that's their culture and it's unique there. I mean, we could have a whole conversation about that and how they sell their books. But hey, Ben, you've been a great guest. How do people get in touch with you?
Well, it's simple. If you can just Google my name, you're gonna find me on LinkedIn. I'm most responsive on LinkedIn, or we can go to highvalueauthor.com. We can click on one of the gazillion buttons there. I'm joking, maybe 3 buttons there, and they're gonna get in touch with my team if they want to, and if they have any questions or if they believe they need help or whatever it is, we can also help.
Great. Well, Ben, thank you so much. You've given great insights, and I'm sure that they'll be handled well if they reach out to Ben Cena. And there is a longer name there, but he'll have to tell you his secret when you talk to him personally. So, Ben, thank you again, and maybe we'll have a coffee the next time I'm in Dubai.
Thanks for tuning into the Amazing Authorities Podcast. If today's episode inspired you, take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more experts like you rise to the top. For behind-the-scenes access and free resources to boost your authority, head to mitchcarson.com. Until next time, stay amazing.